Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. This is the weekly news wrap-up for Friday, July 19th, 2013. Well, Ben Bernanke was at it again, this time testifying in front of the House and the Senate in Congress. And what's he saying? Well, this USA Today headline pretty much says it all. Bernanke, Fed help won't fade. That's what he's talking about. He's talking about the Federal Reserve and its continued propping up of all markets, including the housing market, the stock market, the bond market, the entire economy with this money printing. People are deluding themselves if they think this can go on, and if it ends, it'll end nicely. It's not going to end nicely. This is propping up the economy. Pure and simple. Take it away and kaboom. Everything gets repriced. Now, there's $85 billion a month. Why? So they can control and suppress interest rates along with interest rate derivatives and everything else. But, they're buying $45 billion a month in Treasury bonds and $40 billion a month in mortgage-backed securities from the big banks. I simply call it the mistakes and fraud of bankers. And you got to ask yourself, Bernanke testified in front of two banking committees, one in the House and one in the Senate. Nobody asked a simple question. $40 billion a month times 12, that's nearly $500 billion a year. My question, I've said this before, which banks are getting $40 billion a month? Which banks are getting $500 billion a year? Did you see their earnings lately? Citigroup had good earnings. Morgan Stanley had good earnings. Well, I guess if you take the nasty debt and mistakes off their books, and that way they have pure profits, I guess, they can be solvent and they can, have some profits. Bernanke's doing this to prop up the big banks. Pure and simple. That's all there's to it. And by doing so, he's also propping up the economy. The Fed money printing orgy has produced, basically higher prices for everything. Higher prices in the stock market, record highs in the stock market. He stopped that interest rate rise a little bit, at least some, in the bond market. He also produced, a 16-month record high in oil, the price of oil. It's now $108 a barrel. You know what that means? That means higher gasoline and diesel prices. But, no worries. As long as the banks are taking care of it, it's fine. It's little people having to fill their tanks up. That's part of, the collateral damage of helping out the banks. Meanwhile, you've had the biggest U.S. city to go bankrupt ever in America. Yes, folks, Detroit went belly up this past week. Now, the unions have to feel pretty screwed right about now, the public unions. Because, here they are, they voted for all these Democrats. The Democrats promised them, health care and nice pensions and, 401k matching and then great big packages and poof, in a bankruptcy, that is gone. And this is called a free fall bankruptcy. Nothing's really set up to figure out what's going to go on, but I'll tell you what's going to go on. Anybody on a pension is going to get pennies on the dollar on that pension. It's going to be shoved over to the government and PBJC. All the bondholders, they're going to get creamed as well. They're talking they'll get maybe 10 cents on the dollar. In all, this is a $20 billion blow up. One city in America, $20 billion. And you can bet many other cities are probably going to follow Detroit's lead on shedding this debt. Could Chicago be one of those cities that goes belly up in the future? We shall see. Meanwhile, the Zimmerman verdict outrage continues to distract Americans about the real issues of unemployment and an imploding economy. I mean, think about this. Here we have this whole, the Zimmerman verdict and all this outrage. And which group of people is hardest hit by the unemployment figures? That'd be African Americans, along with everybody else. But African Americans are particularly hard hit. Young African Americans, well, we can't have that. We have to have a distraction because we really can't fix this economy. And you should have seen conservative talk show host Larry Elder, who is a black man, who basically skewered Piers Morgan on CNN and said to him that that Piers Morgan should be ashamed of himself for coming up with this issue, this false issue, where you're making black people think that they have to look over their shoulder because they're being hunted down by Hispanics or whites. That's simply not true. And I brought this up in the past. According to FBI statistics, more than 90% of black people are murdered by other black people. More than 90% of white people are murdered by other white people. And might I remind you, no matter how often they say that Mr. George Zimmerman is a white Hispanic, I'm sorry, he is Hispanic. That's how he considers himself, Hispanic, and everybody else considers him Hispanic, except for a few people in the NAACP and a few people on the far left and some of these, these political commentators looking for a distraction issue. Black people are not being hunted down by other members of other races. They are simply not. Statistically speaking, it's a complete false argument. You should see Larry Elder's interview with Pierce Morgan. It's listed under Hunter's top stories on the site. It's fantastic. He did a lot better job than I did. Here are a few other real issues. How about Obamacare? Obamacare is going to kick in full force at the beginning of 2014, right? And already the Obama administration has put off a key part of it. That's the employer mandate, where any company with 50 or more employees is required to provide health care for its employees. That's been all pushed off. I think it's unconstitutional and illegal, but it's still been pushed off. And you know why it's being pushed off? It's because the Democrats are afraid of the political fallout from this job. What's the political fallout? Take a look at the latest unemployment numbers. Part-time jobs, boom. Contract workers, boom. Full-time jobs, doing. Why? Because companies aren't going to take on more employees full-time or part going to be required to give them health care. Companies around 50 are not going to grow past that because they don't want to hire anybody because they're going to be required to give them health care. Even though this mandate's put off, that's the effect on the job and labor market. It's an economy killer. And then this past week, the president had the gall to come out and say, well, some folks are rooting for the law to fail. Really? His administration just postponed a big part of it. Isn't it already failing? And he postponed it for political reasons. And how about the lawsuits against the Obama administration about NSA spying and data mining for all Americans? Not only just Americans, but people around the globe. The NSA is out of control. Finally, a few people in Congress are looking into the matter. Really? Just looking into the matter? It's completely and totally unconstitutional. And speaking of unconstitutional, we had the indefinite detention clause of the Ndaa. That's where the military can detain anyone who they think is helping al-Qaeda or terrorists, right? One judge blocked it a while ago, and this past week, a 3-judge appeal panel unblocked it. Now, that means the military can stick a bag over your head if they think you're helping terrorists, drag you off without any due process whatsoever, and hold you forever. Completely guts the due process clause of the U.S. Constitution. You hearing anybody even mention that our civil liberties are under attack? I mean, where are all the real liberals about this issue? Oh, that's right. The Trayvon Martin case is so important. It supersedes all these truly national issues. And then, what about what's going on in Syria? I mean, here Secretary of State John Kerry is visiting Jordan, and he says the refugees fleeing from Syria, which 100,000 Syrians have died already in this more than 2-year civil war, more than 100,000 Syrians, 115,000 have fled into Jordan, which could destabilize Jordan. He says it's the biggest humanitarian crisis on the face of the earth. And now there's more talk about ratcheting up, arming the al-Qaeda-backed rebels. And not only that, but direct U.S. military involvement. Now, let me tell you, this is a real important story because the Syrian regime of Assad is backed by Russia, mostly, Iran, and China to some degree. This could touch off a world war, not just a wider regional war, but a world war. Russia is holding drills on the other side of the world. And why are they holding drills? Because they're afraid of a U.S.-Japanese attack. That's what they're saying. This is big stuff, folks. And this whole Trayvon Martin thing. And I'm sorry that Trayvon Martin died. Truly, I'm sorry for his family, but it's not a national issue, and there's not a tip of the iceberg issue where black people are being hunted down by non-black people. That's just not happening. It's a non-issue. And meanwhile, all these bigger issues are being clouded and occluded by the mainstream media. Nothing's being said. That's the way I see it. I'm Greg Hunter. Thank you all for helping us out by using the donations button at the top of the screen. That really does help us out. You all go out and have a nice weekend. Thanks so much for supporting USAWatchdog.com.